My older brother pointed at me and screamed, "Tell everyone you lied or you're out of this family forever." I held up my phone and yelled, "Keep talking. I already sent the recording to everyone sitting here." The worst part is that, for a second, I thought he might actually get away with it. Not because he was right, because he was louder. That is how my brother had always operated. He never needed the facts to be on his side if he could get everyone tired enough to stop asking for them. I was standing in my mom's living room when he said it. My aunt was on the couch. My mom was at the dining table with both hands wrapped around a mug she had already gone cold on. My cousin was near the doorway pretending to scroll on his phone and failing badly at pretending not to listen. And my brother was in the middle of the room with his face red and his finger locked on me like he was trying to pin me to the carpet. I was 40 seconds from shaking. I just did not let it show. That was the first thing I learned about him all over again. If you stay calm long enough, the person yelling usually starts making mistakes. I had spent the last 6 months collecting those mistakes. I had a folder on my phone with screenshots, bank statements, scanned documents, emails, and one audio file that I had checked 3 times before I walked into my mother's house that night. He had no idea how bad this was for him. That was his problem. He never thought I would keep receipts. He always thought I was the kind of brother who would get flustered, apologize, and back down because family was family. He thought wrong. I should probably back up before I get to the part where everybody in the room stared at him like they had just seen a stranger kick down the door. Because that night did not come out of nowhere. It started months earlier with a white envelope in my mother's mailbox, and my brother acting like nothing was wrong. My dad died 2 years ago. He had a stroke at 69, and even though we had time to get to the hospital, it was still ugly and fast and not the kind of thing you ever fully get over. After he died, my mom stayed in the house alone. It was the same house I grew up in. A plain ranch house on a quiet street with a sagging fence out front, a few stubborn rose bushes, and a driveway that always cracked in the same spot every summer. My dad had been obsessed with keeping the mortgage paid off. He was not rich, but he hated debt, and by the time he died, the house was supposed to be free and clear. That mattered to him more than it should have, but I understood it. The house was the one thing he thought he had really given my mom. My older brother, Aaron, was 4 years older than me. He was the golden child in the way a lot of older brothers are without anybody ever saying the words out loud. He was louder, more confident, better at talking people into things, and somehow always managed to look like he was carrying a heavier load than he actually was. If you were standing in a room with Aaron, you would usually know before he spoke that he wanted you to think he was the most responsible person in the room. It worked on almost everybody. He ran a small construction business that had gotten bigger than I ever expected it to, mostly because he was good at charm and decent at getting jobs done fast. He had a wife, a truck, and a way of making every problem sound like it was already halfway solved. I worked at a warehouse for an HVAC supplier. Not glamorous, not impressive, but stable. I was the brother who paid bills on time, helped mom set up her new phone, fixed the leaky faucet in her bathroom, and remembered which grocery store had the good peaches in season. Aaron was the brother who showed up late, carried a heavy toolbox through the kitchen once every few weeks, and acted like that was enough. After Dad died, Mom leaned on him more than she should have. I do not even blame her for that. He had always been better at sounding certain. Certainty looks like competence when you are grieving. For the first year after Dad died, the arrangement seemed normal enough. Aaron said he would help Mom with anything she needed. He started coming by every week to check on the yard, talk about the roof, look at the furnace, and go through the mail with her. At first, I thought that was good. Honestly, I was relieved. I had this quiet guilt that I was not doing enough because I worked full-time and had my own life and could not be there every day. So when Aaron took over the family fixer role, I let him. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was assuming competence, and honesty came together by default. About 8 months after Dad died, Mom called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice had that thin, worried sound she got whenever she was trying not to sound worried. She asked if I had time to look at a letter she had gotten. I told my boss I had to leave early and drove over. She was sitting at the kitchen table with an unopened stack of mail, a pair of reading glasses, and one envelope set apart from the others like she did not want to touch it again. It was from a mortgage servicing company, except the house was supposed to be paid off. I remember the exact moment my stomach dropped because I opened it expecting some obvious mistake and found a notice about a loan payment that had gone unpaid. Not the mortgage, a home equity line tied to my mom's address, a line she did not remember opening. At first, I thought maybe it was some fraud scam, the kind of thing old people get in the mail all the time. But then I looked closer. It had the right address, the right last 4 digits of Mom's checking account, and her signature was on the paperwork. Or at least a signature that looked enough like hers to pass if you were not paying close attention. She sat there staring at me while I read it twice. Then she told me she had never signed anything like that. She said Aaron had asked her to sign some papers a few months earlier because he was helping her refinance the house to get a better emergency cushion. That was the first time I felt something shift from concern to suspicion. She said it like it was a small thing, like a kitchen chore, not like she had just handed someone the keys to the place she lived in. I asked her how much money was involved. She could not answer right away. That was when I knew this was going to be ugly. I drove to the bank with her the next morning. The teller was polite in the way people get, when they know they are dealing with an older woman and a son who looks like he has already decided to be angry if this turns out bad. We were told we needed documentation and an authorization form to get anything detailed. My mom got overwhelmed halfway through the process and started apologizing to the teller, which made me even angrier because she had done nothing wrong. By the time we got home, I had learned just enough to be alarmed and not enough to fix anything. The loan had been opened in her name. The proceeds had gone somewhere. The payments had started, then stopped, and the servicing company had begun sending notices because the account was delinquent. I called Aaron that night. He acted irritated that I was making a big deal out of what he called a temporary family arrangement. He said Mom had wanted to help with his business. He said he had needed short-term cash flow because a client had been late paying a major invoice. He said he was handling it. He said I was overreacting. That last part was his favorite move. If he could make you feel like the nervous one, he would avoid having to answer the actual question. When I asked him why Mom did not remember signing the loan documents, he said she was getting older and mixed up the details. That should have been my second clue because his tone changed when he said it. Not sad, not concerned. Annoyed, like the issue was not the loan but the possibility that I might keep asking about it. I did not tell him anything more that night. I told him I would look into it. Then I spent the next 2 weeks doing exactly that. I took Mom's paperwork folder home and scanned everything. I made a timeline in a notes app. I called the servicing company back and asked for copies of every statement they were willing to mail. I checked county records for the deed and any lien filings. I combed through Mom's bank statements. That was where the picture started to change. The loan money had been deposited into Mom's checking account first. That part was clean, too clean almost. Then, over the course of 4 days, a series of transfers had gone out to Aaron's business account. Not one big transfer, a bunch of smaller ones, enough to make it look less obvious to anyone glancing through the statements. I sat there at my kitchen table with the statements spread out and actually laughed once because it was such a stupid attempt to hide it, and yet it had almost worked. Almost. There were memos attached to some of the transfers. Equipment deposit, supply advance, payroll bridge. He had not even bothered to be creative. The whole thing was written like a man who assumed nobody would ever cross-reference Mom's account with his business records. And that is when I stopped thinking of it as a mistake and started thinking of it as theft. I was not ready to say that out loud yet. I wanted to be wrong. That is another thing people forget. Being right about something awful is not satisfying in the moment. It makes your chest hurt. It makes the world feel smaller. It makes every family dinner and every holiday and every dumb joke at the table feel like it might have been sitting on top of a lie. I called Mom again and asked a few careful questions. She sounded embarrassed. She said Aaron had told her he needed a temporary cushion until the next job payments came in. She said he had promised to pay the loan back quickly. She said he had told her not to worry because the house was just collateral on paper. That phrase made me stop breathing for a second. Just collateral on paper. That was not a phrase a son should ever be saying to his mother about the house she lived in. I asked if she had seen the closing papers. She said Aaron had brought a stack of forms over and told her it was an ordinary family help arrangement, nothing to stress over, and that she had signed where he pointed because she trusted him and had been tired that day and wanted him to leave. That part hurt more than the money because I could picture exactly how it had happened. Mom tired, Aaron efficient, Mom wanting to be helpful, Aaron moving the pen to the right line and talking over the details like the details were beneath her. I wanted to go straight to the brother who had done it and lose my temper in his face. Instead, I went to a lawyer, not some giant drama firm, a small consumer and estate attorney I found after calling around. He was a practical guy with an office that smelled like old paper and coffee. He listened to me, looked through the copies I brought, and asked 3 questions that changed everything. Who notarized it? Where the closing took place? And whether I had proof the money was transferred to Aaron's account. The answer to the last one was yes. The answer to the first 2 took more work. I got the lender to send me the closing package after Mom signed a fraud authorization and filed a dispute. The notary stamp was from a mobile notary service I had never heard of. The closing had allegedly taken place at a strip mall office on the other side of town. The contact phone on the application was Aaron's cell. The email on the loan portal was one Mom did not use. It belonged to a Gmail address I recognized because Aaron had used something similar for his business invoices. At that point, the lawyer told me to stop talking to Aaron about the details and keep everything documented. He said that if this became a civil dispute or a fraud case, the biggest thing would be preserving the sequence of events. He also told me not to warn Aaron that I had proof yet. That was hard, because Aaron kept calling. At first it was casual, then it got more pointed. Then it turned into him telling me I needed to stop poisoning Mom against him. He said I was making her panic over paperwork she did not understand. He said I was turning a family favor into a courtroom fantasy. I started recording the calls after the lawyer said I could, since we were in a one-party consent state. I did not tell Aaron I was doing that, I just listened, and the more he talked, the more he slipped. He complained that the bank was being nosy. He said Mom had been fine with everything until I got involved. He said the paperwork was standard and everybody was acting like criminals for no reason. He said if the loan came under scrutiny, it would make Mom look confused and that would be bad for her. That was when I caught it, not a confession, not yet. A little pressure point. He was not worried about the loan failing. He was worried about the story failing. That told me everything. A few days later, he came by Mom's house while I was there. He had that too casual energy he used when he was trying to seem friendly while actually testing the room. He talked about the weather, the roof, and how hard construction was this year. Then he asked if Mom had gotten any more mail from the lender. I said yes. He said he wanted to see it. I said no. He smiled like I was being difficult but harmless. Then he asked me if I had told anyone outside the family about the loan. That was the question that made the back of my neck go cold. Because I had not yet. He was not checking on me. He was checking on exposure. I told him the family had a right to know if Mom's house was being used as collateral for his business. He shut down fast after that, not angry, careful. He told me to not use words I could not back up. He said I was making accusations that could damage people. Then he left. I went into the hallway and realized my hands were shaking so hard I had to sit down. That evening, I showed Mom the transfer records. She stared at the amounts for a long time and then started crying in that quiet, ashamed way that makes you wish you could physically absorb the pain out of someone. She kept saying she had trusted him because he was her son. She kept saying she should have read more closely. I told her the blame belonged where it belonged. I meant it. Still, I could tell she believed some of it was hers. That is what people like Aaron count on, not ignorance, exhaustion, trust, and the silence that comes from not wanting to look foolish in front of your own child. The next part was the strangest. Once I had enough proof to be dangerous, I stopped feeling powerful. I felt careful. That is a different thing. I made a spreadsheet for the loan dates, transfer dates, missed payments, and the days Aaron had been by Mom's house. I saved screenshots of his texts. I printed the emails where he had told her not to worry and had referred to the loan as a family cushion. I took notes after every conversation. I backed everything up to 2 places, my phone, and a cloud folder with a password nobody in my family could guess. The lawyer had me write a timeline in plain language from the first notice to the last transfer. He said if this got dragged into mediation, bank fraud review, or an estate dispute later, a clear paper trail would matter more than an emotional argument. It felt weird doing it, like I was building a case against my own brother. In a way, I was, and I hated that it was necessary. Meanwhile, Aaron started spinning his own version of events. That was obvious before I even heard all of it. My cousin mentioned at one point that Aaron had told people I was jealous because Mom leaned on him more after Dad died. Aunt Linda, who had always liked Aaron because he was good at carrying boxes and sounding mature, asked Mom if I was upset about not being the one in charge of the house. That one actually made me laugh when Mom told me because it was so pathetic and so on brand. I was not upset about being in charge. I was upset about him draining my mother. But Aaron needed the family to believe this was about sibling rivalry instead of bank statements. He was better at manipulating the social story than he was at covering the paperwork. That ended up being his mistake. The first real break came from the notary. The lawyer sent a formal records request. The notary had signed off on the closing, but the details did not line up. The office address on the acknowledgement did not match the office the company actually used. The timestamp on the notary log did not match the time Aaron claimed the signing happened. And the mobile notary was the sister of one of Aaron's business contacts. That was not proof by itself, but it was enough to make the bank nervous. When the lender opened a fraud review, they asked for a fresh statement from Mom and a copy of the bank transfers. They also asked whether anyone had pressured her to sign. Mom hesitated for exactly half a second before saying yes. That was the moment I knew she was done protecting him, not because she hated him, because she finally understood he had already stopped protecting her. After that, things moved in a strange slow-motion way. The bank froze the account for a review. Aaron's business transfers started bouncing between accounts, which he later described as a temporary administration problem. That phrase sounded so stupid in context that I almost pitied him for about 3 seconds. Then I remembered he had used my mother's house as a line item and got over it. The lender asked Mom to come in with identification and sign a sworn fraud packet. The lawyer went with us. She was nervous, but she was calmer once she realized everything would be done step by step. No one was yelling at her. No one was pressuring her to understand the finance side in real time. Just had to answer honest questions. That should have been the simplest part of the whole situation, but it turned out to be the part Aaron had counted on nobody doing. He had assumed Mom would be too embarrassed to challenge him. He had assumed I would be too intimidated to bring in outside help. He had assumed the bank would be too slow to matter. He made the mistake of underestimating routine. Routine is what catches people like him. A notarized form has a date. A transfer has a timestamp. An account statement has a trail. A lender has procedures. None of those things care how charming your brother is at Thanksgiving. The lender sent a temporary demand letter to Aaron. The lawyer told us not to celebrate yet because the bank still had to finish its review, but it was the first time I slept through the night in months. Not well, but enough. Aaron did not take it well. Of course he did not. He showed up at Mom's house the day after the lender visit, pacing the porch before I even answered the door. He was furious, but the fury had that trapped animal quality to it now. He wanted to know what we had done. I told him we had reported the fraud. He said I was destroying his life over a family misunderstanding. I told him signatures and transfers were not misunderstandings. That set him off. He started talking faster, trying to overwhelm me with half-arguments about cash flow, timing, business taxes, and how Mom had benefited from the house being maintained by his crew. Then he slipped and said something that made his face change halfway through the sentence. He said the only reason the loan looked bad was because I was making him the villain. That was the most honest thing he had ever said, not because he meant to be honest, because he forgot for 1 second that he was supposed to be defending the paperwork and not the role. Mom came to the door then and saw the look on his face. Not angry, not hurt, just done. She asked him if he had really used her house as collateral for his business without telling her everything. He tried to answer in circles. He said it was temporary. He said he had been planning to pay it back. He said the business had a bad stretch and he was trying to keep employees working. He said family should help family. Mom listened to all of it and then asked the one question he had no clean answer for. She asked why he had not told her the truth when he first needed help. He stared at her like she had betrayed him by asking. That was when I knew the moral argument was over. He was no longer trying to justify the act. He was trying to justify the lie, and those are not the same thing. The next week got ugly in a bureaucratic way, which is a special kind of ugly all on its own. The lender requested more documentation. The lawyer filed a formal dispute with the county record office. Mom signed a new power of attorney that gave me limited authority over her finances and medical decisions only if she wanted that arrangement. She did want it. She said Aaron would never get that power again. Watching her sign that paper was harder than I expected, because it felt less like winning than like watching a person close a door they had once left open on purpose. Aaron's wife started calling me around then. She had always been quieter than him, the kind of woman who looked like she had spent years smoothing things over for other people. At first, she sounded defensive. She said he had told her I was overreacting and embarrassing the family. Then she asked to see the bank records. That was another crack. When I sent them to her, she stopped answering for a day. Then she called back and said she had seen enough to know he had not told her the full truth either. I did not get satisfaction from that. Just exhaustion, because I could hear in her voice that she was realizing her whole marriage had been built on a version of Aaron that might not exist when nobody was clapping for him. The family dinner where everything finally blew up happened 3 weeks later. It was not some dramatic planned showdown with torches and legal folders and a sudden burst of thunder. It was just a Sunday dinner my aunt insisted on hosting because, in her words, everybody needed to sit down and be adults. That should have tipped me off. Family people always say that right before they choose one side and call it maturity. Mom came because she wanted witnesses. I came because I was tired of Aaron whispering around me like I was the one hiding something. Aaron came because he thought he could still control the room if he got there first. Aunt Linda was there. My cousin Nikki was there. Aaron's wife came late and sat away from him. My mom sat at the dining table with her purse in her lap like a woman waiting at a doctor's office. I knew the meeting had gone sideways before anybody even spoke because Aaron kept standing instead of sitting. He paced too much. He checked his phone too often. He looked at me like I had already said something unforgivable. Aunt Linda opened by saying she had heard there was a misunderstanding about Mom's loan and that everybody should just be honest and settle it like family. That was a terrible opening, because Aaron immediately took it as permission to go on offense. He started by saying I had told the bank he had stolen from Mom. Then he said I had lied about the transfers being unauthorized. Then he said I had manipulated Mom while she was grieving and confused. He was very good at stacking accusations because it created the illusion that he had evidence for all of them. He pointed at me and screamed that I had to tell everyone I lied or I was out of the family forever. That was the line that froze the room, because he was not just threatening me. He was putting a ritual on it. He wanted the family to watch me submit. He wanted me to choose between public humiliation and exile. I remember looking at my aunt's face and seeing her already halfway to believing him because he was louder. I remember Aaron's wife staring at the table like she wished the wood would open and hide her. I remember Mom's mouth tightening because she had heard the same tone from him earlier and knew exactly what was about to happen. I also remember something very small and stupid. My phone buzzed in my hand because the recording I had sent was moving through the family group chat in real time. I had waited until Aaron started talking. That was deliberate. The recording was from a week earlier when he had cornered me in the driveway and thought the backyard tools and road noise would bury the words. It had him admitting that the loan had been put in Mom's name to get around his business credit issue. It had him saying Mom would not understand the details. It had him saying if anyone asked, he would make it look like I was confused and causing trouble. It had him saying he knew the notary and that the notary would not ask too many questions. It had him saying very clearly that he just needed the house to float his company for a little while and then everything would be fine. It was ugly. It was also the kind of ugly you cannot unhear. So when he finished screaming at me to admit I lied, I did the one thing he was not ready for. I lifted my phone high enough for everyone to see the screen. I told him to keep talking. I told him I had already sent the recording to everyone sitting there. I told him he should probably say my name one more time if he wanted the whole room to hear it. And then for a second, nobody moved. Phones started buzzing at once. Aaron's wife looked down at hers first, then my aunt, then my cousin, then Mom, whose hands were trembling so badly she almost dropped her mug. I did not have to say another word because the room already had the proof. Aaron's face did this awful thing where anger collapsed into panic so fast it looked like his expression skipped a frame. He tried to speak over the phones buzzing around him. He told everyone not to listen. He said I had edited it. He said I had been baiting him. He said the recording was taken out of context. But context is a funny thing when the words are your own, and the bank records are sitting on the table, and the lender had already opened a fraud review. Mom stood up so fast her chair scraped loud enough to make everybody flinch. She asked him if he had really used her house as collateral. He tried the same circle again. She asked him if he had forged anything. He said he had not forged anything. Then he looked at me, realized how bad that sounded, and changed it to saying he had not meant to hurt anyone. That was when Aunt Linda finally asked to see the paperwork. I handed over the folder I had brought, not because I wanted to be theatrical, because I was tired of carrying it around in my car like I was holding a grenade. She spent maybe 5 minutes looking through the statements before her face changed. That was the moment the family story died, not with a bang, with an accountant's level of boredom, transfer dates, contact numbers, a notarized signature with the wrong timestamp, a loan used to bridge a failing business, a mother who had not understood what she signed because her son had not been honest with her. Aaron started talking over her, but nobody was listening to him anymore. Aaron's wife got up from the table and said she needed air. That was the first time I saw her look at him like a stranger. My cousin backed away from the room like he had suddenly remembered he had a car to move. My aunt kept flipping pages and muttering under her breath. Mom sat down slowly, put both hands on the table, and started crying. Not loud. Just the sort of deep, silent crying that makes everybody else in the room feel like they have failed her in ways they did not fully understand until that second. Aaron tried one last time to turn it on me. He said I had humiliated him in front of the family. I told him he had used my mother's house to cover his own bad decisions and then tried to force her into silence. That got him moving toward me, not enough to be a physical threat, but enough that everybody in the room stiffened. I was scared then, I will admit that, not of being hit, of making the situation worse. Because once somebody like Aaron feels cornered, he stops thinking about consequences. He just wants the room to feel his pressure. But before he could come close, my aunt held up the printed fraud complaint from the lawyer and told him the bank had already been notified. That stopped him better than my anger would have. He looked at the papers like they had appeared out of nowhere, which was ridiculous because he had caused every page of them. He asked who had been talking to the bank. Mom answered. That was the quietest and strongest I had ever heard her. She said she had. She said she had signed the dispute. She said she was done being told she was confused when she was actually being lied to. He stared at her like he had never considered she might choose not to protect him. That was his real shock. Not the recording, not the bank, not the papers. The fact that the mother he had counted on to stay embarrassed and soft had finally gotten angry in a useful direction. The dinner ended without anybody finishing the food. Nobody tried to pretend otherwise. Aaron left first, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the glass in the frame. His wife left 10 minutes later with her bag and a face I still think about sometimes because it was not triumphant or vindictive. It was just tired. Aunt Linda stayed behind with Mom and me. She apologized in a way that actually sounded real, which mattered more than I expected. She said she should have asked harder questions sooner. She said Aaron had always been able to talk his way out of discomfort. She said she had mistaken confidence for honesty. That was a painful sentence because it applied to half the family. Over the next month, things moved the way real consequences move, slowly at first, then all at once. The lender completed the fraud review and flagged the loan as unauthorized. Because the money trail went directly from Mom's account to Aaron's business account, the bank treated it as a serious internal fraud matter. The county records office flagged the notarization issue. The lawyer helped Mom replace every financial access point Aaron had ever touched. New passwords, new account numbers, new mail routing, a locked file box in my apartment, a fresh will review, a new power of attorney, not because she was dying, because she had learned painfully that family trust is not a substitute for safeguards. Aaron tried calling her several times. He tried calling me even more. I did not answer. I kept every voicemail, not because I wanted the recordings as souvenirs, because the lawyer said not to delete anything. Aaron eventually stopped leaving apologetic messages and started leaving angry ones. Then those stopped too. A week after the dinner, a detective from the county financial crimes unit called Mom to ask questions. That was the point where the situation stopped being a family mess and became an actual case. I had never seen Mom so calm in my life. She answered every question directly. She explained that she had trusted her son. She explained that she had not understood the loan was in her name only. She explained that she had never intended to place the house at risk. The detective told her that elder financial abuse cases like this were common and that the clearer the paper trail, the better. I almost laughed at how much work it had taken just to get to the point where a stranger could say that sentence out loud. Aaron ended up having to pay a lot of legal fees. His business account got hit with chargebacks and review holds. A couple of clients pulled jobs when they heard he was under investigation. One supplier demanded immediate payment before releasing materials. His wife moved into a short-term rental for a while, and then, from what I heard through the family grapevine, she started talking to a divorce attorney. I did not follow the details because I was too busy making sure Mom's house stayed protected. That was the part I cared about. The house was ultimately removed from the loan exposure because the bank could not prove informed consent and because the signature trail was compromised. That alone felt surreal. All those months of fear and paperwork and the thing that started it all ended up being the exact thing that unraveled the lie. The house stayed with Mom. The loan damage never fully disappeared from the stress it caused, but it did not take the home. Aaron lost a lot more than he expected to lose, and he lost it in the one way he never seemed prepared for. He lost the room. Family gatherings changed. People stopped letting him dominate conversations. My aunt, who used to treat him like the responsible one, started asking for documents whenever he mentioned helping with anything financial. My cousin, who had always shrugged off his stories, learned to stay out of them. Aaron did not get exiled in some dramatic movie way. That would have been too neat. Instead, people just stopped relying on his version of events, and for a man like him, that is almost worse. Mom went through a rough patch after everything came out. There were a few weeks where she seemed embarrassed every time I visited, as if she was worried I saw her as gullible. I had to keep telling her that being trusting was not the same thing as being stupid. She believed people who were supposed to protect her. That was not a character flaw. That was the whole point of family. What Aaron did was twist that instinct into access. Once she accepted that, she got stronger again. She started handling her own bills with me sitting beside her just to help with the online logins. She asked questions. She kept copies. She stopped apologizing every time she needed clarification. That change mattered more to me than the bank outcome because it meant he had not just taken money. He had tried to take her confidence, and he failed. As for me, I felt weirdly flat for a while after everything broke. People always imagine the victory part as fireworks. Mostly it was just relief with a headache. I had spent so long being careful and documenting and waiting for the right moment that once the truth landed, my body did not know what to do with itself. I slept badly. I checked my phone too often. I jumped every time a family number called. I also felt guilty, which I did not expect, not because I had exposed him, because part of me wished I had seen it sooner, not the theft exactly. The scale, the confidence with which he had been using Mom's trust. I kept thinking about every time I had watched him joke at dinner, while already knowing there was debt sitting under the table like a live wire. That guilt took a while to untangle. The lawyer told me something useful during that period. He said people like Aaron count on other people being decent longer than they are dishonest. That sentence stuck with me, because it explained why I had let so much slide. Not because I was naive, because I assumed the family version of events was still basically real. I did not want to be the person who turned every holiday into an audit. Aaron had forced that on us, not me, him. A few months later, I got a letter from his attorney asking whether I would consider mediation on some of the financial fallout. I forwarded it to our lawyer and let them deal with it. No grand speeches, no revenge, just procedure. That, in the end, was what saved us. Procedure, records, patience, the boring stuff. The thing Aaron thought made me weak was what made him lose. He had built everything on being able to pressure people into reacting before they had proof. I had the proof. I just waited. There was one last family moment that still feels important to me, maybe because it was so ordinary. About half a year after the dinner, Mom and I were at the grocery store on a Saturday morning. Nothing dramatic. Just bananas, bread, coffee, and the usual terrible store-brand paper towels she insisted were fine, even though they were absolutely not fine. We ran into one of her neighbors, and she introduced me as the son who helped her keep things organized. Not the son who saved her, not the son who fought for her, just the one who helped. That seemed right. We got back to the car, and she sat there for a second before telling me she had been afraid for a while that the family would never feel normal again. I told her I did not think normal was the goal anymore. I think that was the first time she smiled without looking tired. We drove home, unpacked the groceries, and she put the bananas in the same old blue bowl she had used for decades. The house looked the same. The difference was that now she knew exactly who had tried to take it from her, and so did everyone else. Aaron is still out there somewhere, still trying to explain himself to whoever is willing to hear the first half of the story. I do not keep track. I do know he never got the apology he wanted from me. He never got the moment where I stood up in front of the family and confessed I had lied. What he got instead was a recording, a paper trail, a bank review, and a room full of people hearing his own words played back to him with no place to hide. That was better than yelling, better than revenge, better than making a scene, because the truth did what I could never have forced it to do on my own. It exposed him, and once it did, nobody in that room ever looked at me the same way again. Not because I became the favorite, because I became the one who did not flinch when the facts showed up. And honestly, that was enough for me.